first of all, one thing that was great about the show was that, yes, there were women in skimpy clothes, but we were on a beach. What else do you expect? We were wearing one pieces. I always knew when someone hadn't really seen the show and they mentioned the word bikini, because there
Yeah.
weren't, the background actors had bikinis on. And by the way, the grayer it was outside, the brighter the bikinis got on the background actors. That was one of
Funny.
and the parasols. More parasols went up when it was gray out, because LA
Funny.
is from something called June gloom that can go into
Yes.
July, and so
Like,
it can be pretty gray there. So yes, we were wearing bathing suits, but they weren't outrageous bathing suits at all. And we were playing lifeguard, so we needed
yeah.
to. There were also the women, in terms of what you said about healthy lifestyle. We were running around and doing as many rescues as the men, and our physicians were equal to the men. Like my physician as lieutenant was equal to Hasselhoff.
So I have to tell you, I'm so excited to be speaking with you, and this is going to make you laugh. I hate working out, okay? It's just not my thing. But I found this hack for working out, and I tell everybody who asks me now. I have a large flat screen TV in my bedroom. And what I have to do is I have to go to Amazon Prime and put Baywatch reruns on the screen. Okay. I have to watch all of you guys looking incredible and athletic. And then I watch it. And as I'm watching it, I work out.
Hey, that is awesome. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. So people ask me, and I'm like, this is what I do. I'm like, go to Amazon Prime, put on Baywatch, and trust me, you will want to work it. You will want to work it.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Is that why you thought, I think I'm going to interview that woman?
Yeah, because I'm like, because I tell everybody that when they ask me, they're like, oh, how do you stay like disciplined? How do you do it? And so I was thinking, and then I was actually watching you on Nicole Eggert's podcast,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
guys were talking about the Hulu documentary on Baywatch that's coming out. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. And, and what I always loved about you is that when you watch the show, I mean, not only did you have this incredible athletic physique, but you really looked every bit the lifeguard. I mean, you were like diving off of boats, you're swimming in all kinds of conditions. And I'm like, I mean, were you really as athletic and as good of a swimmer as it looked on the screen, or was it editing, or how did that work?
Well, I did get help from lifeguard Michael Newman on how to dive off a moving speedboat, and he was one of the lifeguards on the show,
Yeah.
who started off his background and then had a speaking part later. He was on, I think, longer than anybody. I think he was on in
Wow.
the pilot and then continued through, maybe not Baywatch Hawaii, but yeah, for probably a decade. And anyway, so he helped me with those skills, which I did not have. But yes, I had been a junior lifeguard. I was a certified EMT, and I was a swimmer. So, I mean, I hadn't swum in high school or anything, but I swam summers and everything, and I was a good swimmer. So I was very comfortable, and that was why they interviewed me in the first place. It was that
Oh,
one of the producers, Greg Bonan, apparently I had never met him and didn't know he swam there, but he swam at the same pool that I did, and he heard I was a good swimmer. And so I was 10 years into my acting career, and he asked me to audition. And at first, or I was asked to audition through my agents, of course, but at first I thought, I don't want to do a series. It was 1991, and I was doing movies, and I was thought that a series would trap me. I was very commitment phobic. I had a motto, don't live with anybody, don't get a tattoo, and don't do a series, because they felt all too permanent for me.
funny.
So,
Funny.
um, but my friend John Allen Nelson was in the show the first year, 2 years.
Mhm.
And so he talked about how wonderful it was. And my manager said, look, Alexandra, the show's really popular in Germany, and you do a lot of films that are funded by German money. So you should do it. So I ended up, after canceling the first audition, going in the second time. And then, it's so ironic. It was it became my favorite job in my 40-year acting career and over 100 films and television shows. It by far had the most joy for me. So there you go. That is a testament to changing your mind and opening and saying yes.
Absolutely. Was it the outdoors, the beach? I mean, what was it that was, I mean, it looks magical, but what was it that did it for you?
It was a lot the outdoors, the beach. You know, as a woman actress, oh gosh, we have to go into makeup, put on a lot of makeup, a lot of hair, and wear sometimes uncomfortable shoes, and we're just so aware of how we look and this. And then just to be actually in my contract, because I had worked so much, and most of the actors who came on the show had not worked a long time, I had quite a strong contract. And my manager insisted that I not wear a bathing suit. And so I was like, okay, I'm fine. Now I don't want to wear a bathing suit because I played a lieutenant. Well,
Right.
after the first episode of being in that uniform, I was like, heck no, put me in a bathing suit. And I don't think I mean, I wore maybe that lieutenant's skirt and starched white shirt maybe 2 more times in the 5 seasons I was on. And that was that. I
Right.
went to the red bathing suit and was very happy. So that was part of it. And also I realized that my nature was that I really loved being with this, coming to set every day and seeing the same people and being able to develop a character over a long period of time instead of a few weeks or months. So gosh, it was wonderful, and the cast was terrific.
I mean, what's interesting to me is that when the show was first starting, I didn't watch it when it was on NBC, but once the original cast that was in syndication, which included you, Pamela Anderson, Nicole Eggert, David Charvet, David Hasselhoff. Am I missing anybody?
Well, that was the second year of syndication. The
Okay.
first year of syndication had Erica Leniak and Billy Warlock from
Okay.
from the NBC show and Hasselhoff, but then they left and pretty much a new cast came in. Yes, Pamela, myself, Charvet, and Nicole Eggert, along with Kelly Slater, who had a recurring role but was in quite a few
Yes.
episodes. He's the world champion surfer, so he was on
Sure.
the too. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did you guys all gel? Like what kind of friendships were forged and how did you guys gel in that first season together?
That season, by the way, was the season, I think it was the end of that season where word got out that we were the most popular show in the world and that we had 1 billion viewers every week. Before that, I was really on the show because, I thought it would help my film career. And
Okay.
so, and started enjoying it right away. But yeah, it was just, it was great. I'll tell you, this is what I've learned. When you're on a show that's successful and there's a lot of new actors involved, it can be a dicey thing on how they deal with fame. I'd already dealt with fame because I'd starred in movies with Kevin Costner and Pierce Brosnan and Tom Hanks. I'd already done quite big films, but there
Mhm.
were new actors. Charvet and Pamela Anderson, Nicole Eggert had a big career, and then the subsequent years they took a lot of new people who were new, and
Mhm.
you put them on a show with such a spotlight on it, you can develop some bad habits in those actors, diva attitudes, maybe not professional. But because we had Hasselhoff at the helm, he was such a hard worker, had such a positive attitude, especially to fans, very respectful, and understood that we were there only because of the people around us, the crew, the fans, and that we needed to be respectful to everybody. And so he was such a good role model for all the actors. And so that was, I think, really made the set wonderful because nobody ever was a diva ever. And Pamela Anderson, she became a breakout star from Baywatch in the 90s and really became the most famous woman in the world during that time. And
Yes.
she worked really hard because there are a lot of beautiful, sexy women in Hollywood. So yes, she's beautiful. Yes, she's sexy, but she also really, really worked hard. And that is why she became so successful. And then of course, I'm sure there's other factors, luck and
Yeah.
sparkle, etc. But
Yeah.
really, I
Yeah.
just want to say she worked hard. She never complained. She got in that water in December in a bathing suit. So
Yeah.
we just had a really fun, happy, hardworking, respectful cast and crew.
That's awesome. I want to talk about body image stuff because back in the 90s, it's interesting to me. I remember I was, I think, a teenager, or very, very early 20s when the show was at its most popular, and you heard a lot of stuff in the media about it pushing unrealistic body standards and plastic surgery and this and that. What's interesting to me is that I always felt differently about it. I felt like it pushed a very healthy, fitness conscious, athletic body. And when I look at what's going on now, especially with Instagram and a lot of the stuff that's going on these days, it really, to me, still to this day, I think that if people go back and they watch it now with like fresh eyes, it really played a lot into healthy lifestyle, fitness, athleticism. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very biased, of course, because I had a wonderful experience on the show. So I'll just speak to it from my very sunshine outlook, no pun intended,
Okay.
about the show. But first of all, one thing that was great about the show was that yes, there were women in skimpy clothes, but we were on a beach. What else do you expect? We were wearing one pieces. I always knew when someone hadn't really seen the show and they mentioned the word bikini, because there
Yeah.
weren't the background actors had bikinis on. And by the way, the grayer it was outside, the brighter the bikinis got on the background actors. That was one of
Funny.
and the parasols. More parasols went up when it was gray out, because LA
Funny.
is from something called June gloom that can go into
Yes.
July, and so
Like,
it can be pretty gray there. So yes, we were wearing bathing suits, but they weren't outrageous bathing suits at all. And we were playing lifeguard, so we needed
yeah.
to. There were also the women, in terms of what you said about healthy lifestyle. We were running around and doing as many rescues as the men, and our positions were equal to the men. Like my position as lieutenant was equal to Hasselhoff.
Right.
And all the lifeguards, it wasn't any of that, which you saw a lot in movies back in the 90s, where bad guy comes in and the woman cowers while the guy fights the other guy. No, we didn't have a lot of fights on the show either, actually, because England was one of our big fan bases, and a lot of very, very young 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds love that show. And they love the boats and the brightness. And so we didn't have, I think at one point there was something that went out that said you can't point guns. No guns could be pointed at a person or something, because of the young audience. So really, when people say it was a misogynistic show, it's not true at all. The women were powerful. And so there was that. I can't speak. I myself did have a different body type from everybody else
Sure.
who been on the show, was before me and after me. I think there's only a couple women who had breasts that were not enhanced, and I was one who didn't have enhanced breasts, and plus I have very small. I have an A cup, or A minus A cup. I'm very. It's so I felt like I mean, for me, it was I wasn't at all bothered by the women with breasts bouncing up and down on the beaches. I just thought, well, that's bodies. People want to see that. What's wrong with it? It's just bodies. And I suppose the unrealistic was that, yes, you needed to buy up those breasts for the most part if
Right.
you wanted
Right.
them,
That
especially because
aspect
having
of
a
it,
thin.
that aspect, that, the breast implant aspect, but like if you're putting the breast implant part aside, but yes, I would agree with you on that.
Right. I mean, it's not natural to have really large breasts and to be low body fat everywhere else on your body. That
Yeah.
just isn't, that's an anomaly. Some women have it, but it's not common at all. So that would be unrealistic. But in terms of being slender, definitely there wasn't as much diversity as there is now.
Sure.
Nobody was overweight. And there was even a clause in our contract that said that if we gained 5 pounds, we couldn't gain more than 5 pounds. And when I saw that, or maybe it was your weight couldn't fluctuate 5 pounds.
Up or down?
I'm not sure. My weight, I did lose weight when I broke up with my boyfriend, so it definitely went down more than 5 pounds. And I know Pamela, there was a time when actually, as happens when women are around each other and one loses weight, others will often lose weight. I don't know if it's maybe we were all going through relationship trauma, but that clause that said we couldn't lose 5 pounds or gain 5 pounds, that was for the men and the women. And actually it was installed because season one of the male actors was so happy about his job that he partied his way at like 15 pounds heavier by the time he
Oh
got
my
on the set.
God.
That was the story I heard. Because at first I was like, hey, it's not just the women who have to keep their weight. And they're like, no, 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 everybody has to keep their weight. You know, the men had a lot of pressure on that show too, to keep their, abs and looking good. Yeah. So I can't deny that, on TV, people aren't pushing a certain look. And there was definitely a look for Baywatch. And also we were all very white, which, I had an issue with at the time
Yeah.
and was quite vocal about it. But it was the 90s. It was a different sensibility and most shows were like that. So I myself, when I came on the show, I had been speaking of body image, I had been anorexic and then bulimic for a dozen years. And I talked about that on the show with Nicole.
Yeah.
So the year before I was offered the part, I had gotten abstinent. I had stopped. And so I wouldn't have taken this job, being in a bathing suit every day, or, even a uniform every day on the beach. I probably wouldn't have taken it. I know I wouldn't have taken it if I was
I just
still.
in the throes of that still.
No, exactly. And so actually I went on the show feeling totally comfortable with my body, so relieved that I wasn't at war with it. And
Mhm.
my body naturally kind of went down a couple pounds. So I was actually quite happy with where I was and what I looked like. I never felt like I needed to look a different way, even though I recognized that I was looked at as less sexy because I didn't have the curves that other women did. I didn't
Right.
really care because I had a loving boyfriend, and I grew up in Connecticut where breasts were just not really a thing. So I was kind of surprised that people wanted these big breasts. I mean, I admire theirs. And whenever somebody got a breast job, I was always curious to see what it looked like. I'd say,
Right.
hey, how does it look? And they would take it
Yeah,
down.
there's so people who have breast implants, they're like, here, feel them. Here. You're
It's
like,
like they're not a
stop
part of their body. It's hilarious.
it.
Um, so and look, those women, my co-stars were beautiful. They looked hot, and they're beautiful and they're lovely people. So, I guess, did I answer your question? Kind of.
Yeah, yeah, yes, very generously. I'm curious about something though. In watching your career, you always had what seemed like a very slim toned physique. So what triggered the eating disorder, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, no, not at all. And I'm glad you asked. Eating disorders I tell people that when someone has an eating disorder, it's not really about what they eat, it's what's eating them. And
Mhm.
so my eating disorder came from, I learned through 12 years of therapy, that it came from not owning my own power and not being authentically me. In other words, I was trying to please everybody. And then I would sort of go into my room and please myself with food. So food became, you know, that was, and then I would binge, and then I would throw up, and it's sort of I lived with this pain in my chest, this feeling in my chest that I needed to either get rid of or fill up. And I did it with food. And the only way I could do it was by binging and throwing up. And
Okay.
then probably because you're so exhausted and you feel so terrible, now whatever's going on in your chest is really minimized by
Yeah.
your feeling just terrible overall. So I learned to be more authentic. And when I first started acting, actually, my voice was very little, had a very little voice. And I even, on Baywatch, it's probably less powerful than it is now because I've come into my power over the decades. And that character of Stephanie Holden helped me come into my power. I based
Okay.
her on my twin sister, who is very grounded, was a firefighter at the time, very powerful. So she was partly based on my sister. And so that's what really helped me overcome the bulimia and the eating disorder, was having boundaries, saying no, realizing
Mhm.
that if I didn't please people, that they wouldn't die, that I wasn't that important,
Okay.
so yeah, so at that I learned in therapy, and then I went to Overeaters Anonymous, the 12-step program, and within a month of doing the 12 steps and having a sponsor, I stopped throwing up. And it's now
Oh,
been, I just celebrated my 33rd anniversary of not being bulimic. And what's amazing for anybody who has struggled with eating disorders, which so many women have in various degrees, and men too actually have disordered eating, is that in the last 33 years, I've only felt like binging maybe a handful of times, because I really keep strong boundaries on what I will or will not do in my life. And I don't try and please people to the, so that it hurts me.
so interesting because I don't know much about it, and I always thought it was related to the quest to look physically perfect. But what it sounds like to me is it's a kind of a people-pleasing personality, and then you're kind of injuring, you're self-injuring, almost like you're turning whatever anger and resentment inward rather than expressing when you don't want to do something or when you don't like something. Or
Yes,
interesting.
I love that. You said expressing. So instead of expressing out, we stuff it in. And I stuffed it in with food. Now, I'm not going to, I don't want to minimize the fact that the reason I chose food was because I wanted to be a perfect little girl. And looks for women is so, there's so much pressure to look a certain way. And I wanted to please people, and I wanted to be liked. I wanted boys to like me. So having appetites is not feminine.
Right.
And having a loud voice is having desires and wants, and standing up for yourself felt
You just
feminine.
described my personality. Maybe that's why I'm single right now.
How's that? Tell me about that. What's your personality?
I'm totally outspoken. I tell people where it's at and how I feel and how I see things. I tell people when they're violating my boundaries. And I've always had like a full-throated voice.
Mm.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's because in my house growing up, I had to fight to be heard because everybody always talked over everybody, and everybody, it was like, if you weren't like this, you weren't getting anywhere in my house.
Oh,
I
well,
don't
that's also
know.
why you probably don't have an eating disorder. I also did want to disappear. I wanted to
Mhm.
be small physically, um, because I felt that was more feminine.
Okay.
And yeah, there's like, it's complicated. It's more complicated than someone just setting boundaries, but yeah. And then, a couple of years into my eating disorder, I became a model in New York and went to Milan. And so there, I just basically threw myself into a business that demanded even more, emphasis on looks and things. And so my bulimia got pretty bad. And after a couple of years, I left that business. I told my agent I couldn't because my bulimia was so bad. And when I went to acting, it actually felt freeing acting, because they don't have a mandate that you be, 35, 25, 35, or 34, 24, 34, those being your measurements. They didn't have that kind of mandate. So even though they wanted lead actresses to be slender back then, they didn't mandate that you had measured yourself, and that, which is what the modeling industry,
Okay.
pretty much asked of you. So I actually felt quite relieved being an actor, going into acting, even though it took me, another 10 years to get over my bulimia. Yeah. So
Well, I'm glad you did. I want to ask you about, I hope it's okay. I want to ask about Yasmine Bleeth, who played your sister, Caroline, who actually has the name of your real life twin sister, right? Was that your input, by the way?
yes, it was. Well, actually, no, that wasn't my input. But when I first got on the show, they asked me what I wanted to name myself, my own character, Stephanie Holden. And I picked Stephanie because there was a girl in my second grade class whose name was Stephanie. I thought it was a good name. And I think I suggested Caroline too, because I knew she was going to be the person who inspired, was a thread through who this character was. And then the Holden comes from my math teacher, John Holden, who was a real strong, he was a coach and he was very strict and very disciplined. He loved working out. He was a lot about what Stephanie Holden was. So they said, oh, sure, we fixed Stephanie Holden. That'll be your name. But Caroline had been one of the names I'd suggested. And so when Yasmine became my sister, they named her and said, oh, we named her after your sister, your real life sister. Was that sweet?
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah. Mm-hmm. That was
So
lovely.
first, I want to ask you, what was your guys' relationship playing sisters on the show? Was there a bond in real life? Was there a friendship that came of it?
Yes, for sure. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. And she would always joke. I asked her for style advice because she would walk into the makeup room at 6 a.m, the makeup trailer at 6 a.m, and she would look so cute. I mean, she would have the most wonderful outfit on. Meanwhile, I'd have the same sweats and t-shirt that I wore to the set yesterday, right? And so whenever there was a red carpet event, she steered me towards the designers that I should go to. And I still have some of those dresses actually today. And then she'd also say, whenever there were rescues to be done, she'd say, give them to Alexandra. She wants to do that rescue. Yes, wasn't as into the rescues. And I loved rescues so much. I always wanted to do more rescues. There was a show where Yasmine got to she do a ton of rescues. And I was like, and she didn't want to, she's like, oh, I'm going to do all these rescues and they're at night. And I'm like, I'll do it. Just put me in instead of her. She was like, sure. But no, they didn't. So yeah, she's wonderful. And I've seen her since the show several times since the show ended. Went visit her in rehab when she was overcoming her addictions. And we worked together on the Baywatch movie later, and her husband is wonderful. We've been out to dinner with her husband, her and my friend and the other cast member, Jason Simmons. We're all very close. So she's wonderful. She's chosen not to involve herself in Hollywood for several decades, and I respect that a lot.
Was it a conscious decision for her sobriety to step away and kind of retire from that?
I don't know if it was for her sobriety, but I know it was for her happiness. I know
Okay.
definitely it was for her happiness. So that's linked to sobriety, right? So perhaps, but I wouldn't want to speak for her, but she's super smart too. Really smart. She lost her mother at a very young age, and she just developed just just a lovely, lovely person.
So you guys are still in touch?
Yes.
Okay, that's really nice. And
Yeah.
was she healthy during her time on the show? I mean, was she happy, healthy? Did the issues happen afterwards?
Yes, they happened afterwards. When
Okay.
she went on to another series with Don Johnson. I don't know if it was, I think it was Nash Bridges, but her issues started when she was on Baywatch. She was amazing and healthy and had a really positive, by the way, body image of herself. And yeah, it was a real inspiration there.
Okay, and she's healthy and happy these days?
Yeah, she is very happy. She and her husband, Paul, they've been together for 30 years, or maybe not quite 25, but they are so in love.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. Have you ever watched Baywatch? Like, did you watch it back then and do you watch it now?
We would get video. I have a bunch of video cassettes that I would watch to see, just because I learn. I'm not one of those actors who doesn't watch myself, because I learn from how I am. If I'm not making acting mistakes or
Yeah.
tics, I want to know. So yes, I have watched them, all the ones I've been in. I'm pretty sure, pretty much all of them. But I don't have a television, and I have never had a television actually.
Anywhere in home?
No, now, do you really need a television? I'm online, so I
Right.
can watch the show on Amazon Prime, but through the 90s, the 80s, 90s and 2000s, no, I never had a television. I had a monitor, so I was able to watch DVDs, and TV was everywhere anyway. Like at the gym, there'd be TV, so I could I had an agent who got mad at me because I didn't have a TV, and I just I was so busy doing other things. It's kind of like today with social media. I am not very good with social media. I'm busy doing other things outside and volunteering and working. So I didn't have time, and I didn't grow up in a household where television was big, we weren't allowed, we were very, very strict with television. So I'm more of a reader and a doer. So,
And you're
but,
like,
but all this to say that I was in an Airbnb, and I don't even know how to work these smart TVs. My mom has one, so I'm kind of trying to help her with it, and there's Baywatch is on. I turn it on, and whoever was there before was watching Baywatch. So I was tickled, and I saw, a few minutes of it. So
is it like, do you like watching yourself? Do you cringe when you watch yourself? How do you feel about that?
I think now I cringe for the early stuff, mostly because A, I've gotten better, and B, I don't know, I'm not that person. I'm just a better person. I think we all, hopefully we'll all grow to
Yes.
be better, fuller people.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy it though. I enjoy it because after 35 years, I forgot, like, oh, what's happening? I can't remember this storyline. So, and
Yeah.
of course, I love to see my friends on the show. So I would say overall that I got a kick out of it. Yeah, I got a kick out of it.
And you're a natural born activist. I mean, I remember watching you. Okay. I remember watching this documentary that came out in the early 2000s called Who Killed the Electric Car? And I remember you being in that. I've seen you get arrested a time or two. Uh, and I know that you are kind of an environmental warrior. You're a warrior for animals. Where does that come from? Were you raised that way?
My activism, I always say, comes from my mother, who wasn't a sign carrying activist, like marching activist, but she gave blood. She always voted. She volunteered at the church. We had kids come spend the summer with us who were inner city kids. So she was always, she boycotted lettuce in the 70s because Cesar Chavez asked us to, and for the workers. So there was always that. So when I went out on my own and moved to LA, I was shocked that people didn't volunteer and get involved. I was just couldn't believe a life without it. So yeah, I started very, very young. I wrote to President Nixon when I was 7 and asked him to stop pollution. And then I was head of the energy committee in the 70s at my high school to try and save energy at the school. So the environment was definitely an important issue for me. I do look at the world through environmental eyes. Like if I look at a car, I don't look at its sleek lines or how fast it goes. I just want to know how efficient it is, if it pollutes or not.
Yeah. And
So
you have a podcast called Switch for Good.
yes, I'm currently hosting a podcast and have been hosting it for the last 5 years with my co-host Dotsie Bausch, who's an Olympian, and we are both plant-based. We're both vegan, and so it helps people improve their health through eating and encourages a plant-based diet. But now that we've done almost 300 episodes, we've expanded to it being, healthy living. We can't talk about like benefits of plants every single episode. So,
Yeah.
but it's a healthy living, plant-based, positive mindset.
Very
Uh,
nice.
yeah.
Were you ever a meat eater or were you vegan for as long as you can remember?
I became a vegetarian when I was 14, when I read a book called A Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lapay. And she was talking about the environmental benefits of
Mhm.
not eating meat and how important that was. So I stopped meat when I was 14, and I didn't become vegan, which is cutting out all animal products, including
Yeah.
dairy, until I was 49. So it was only, wait, no, sorry, not 49. It's been 14 years. So I'm 61 now. So what is that? 47? 47. So it took me 33 years to become full vegan, but I stopped wearing leather in my 20s, and all my acting contracts had no makeup that was tested on animals since I was 21 or something. Couldn't be used on me. I wouldn't wear fur when I was modeling. So I was basically I was pretty much a vegan, except for I had some dairy in my diet, which I took out when I was 47, and now have been vegan now for 14 years. And it's been a very positive thing, not only for my fit, one of the excuses that I had to not cut out dairy, which I loved frozen yogurt. I love Caesar salads,
Yeah, I know.
was that I was afraid that I would go back to my eating disorder because I felt that it was restricting and that I
Addictive.
might go back. So that was my reasoning. But the interesting thing was that when I actually did become vegan for ethical reasons, it was like, because my diet and my values were aligned, I was more authentic. I was more myself. And so actually, if anything, my relationship with food improved even more, because now food became something higher than just calories or fuel. It became a statement about caring for the planet and animals. So that was a very interesting thing. So I've only felt the positive benefits of it. But my husband is a meat eater. He doesn't eat a lot, but he does eat meat. My sister and my brother are vegans, and so there's a lot of different kinds of people in my life, and I accept them all.
Okay.
But for me, it's a important way to go forward.
And I wanted to ask you about, I've seen you give speeches on the Earth's population,
Yeah.
and I'm curious to get your take on something. So we all know that the Earth's population has grown exponentially, right? And that you chose to be child free because you feel that we need to, it's weird. It's like when you say, oh, we need to reduce the Earth's population, it almost sounds like, when I've talked to people about this issue, what they say to me is, oh, a zero birth rate is a horrible thing, Allison, because then there's not enough people in the workforce, and then there's not enough people paying into the system, and there's not enough productivity, and you need more people to be born. And so I wanted to get your take on like that side of things, and what your counter argument is to that.
Sure. Just to start off, because not everybody really understands population, how it's grown. But when I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet, and now there are 8 billion. So and since my mom was born, it has quadrupled the number of people on the planet. So it's really growing, as you said, exponentially, even though our family sizes are smaller. So when you read headlines, the population is not going down. We're still adding almost a quarter of a million people every day to the planet, adding 220,000 people to the planet. Okay, that's when you take away deaths and you factor in births. So
Yeah.
we're adding 220,000 people a day. So population is not getting smaller. What's gotten smaller is fertility rates, the number of kids per couple. But because there's so many people, like now there's 8 billion people, maybe
Yeah.
what, 4 billion of them are in childbearing range. They're having babies instead of when I was born in the 60s, when only maybe a billion and a half people were having babies, were in fertility range.
Yeah.
That's why the population is still growing. So when we see these headlines saying the population is falling, that isn't true. The population is still getting larger. And we add about 1 billion people every 11 years now. 1 billion people every 11 years we're adding to the planet. And so what I'm asking is not a zero population growth, a population rate. I would
Right.
like to see no more growth, which will take a little bit of time and people, which means that on average, instead of having 2.5 kids per couple, which is the average number of kids being born on the planet today, a number of kids per couple being born on the planet today, to go down to one, and then some people might have 2 kids, some people might have 3, some people might have none. And if we can go down to fewer, under 2.5, which is not replacement, 2.1 is replacement. So if everybody on the planet had 2.1, then the planet would eventually stay at 10 billion. And that's where actually the United Nations is predicting that the population will get to 10 billion in the later this century. I'm really concerned about having 10 billion people on the planet. I just read that Spain has to get most of its water from desalination. And we know that certainly Phoenix, Arizona is having drought issues. California is having drought issues. The more people there are, the more resources we need for them. For me, it's a simple math. And the poorest people on the planet, the ones with the least education, usually not the white men of America, for example, those are the people who are going to get most badly hit. Elon Musk, who has 12 kids, he's not going to be so bothered by the fact that there's not enough water because he's just going to buy some water from somewhere else and get it for himself. But in countries all over the world, we're struggling with getting enough water, having enough land to grow food. And with climate change, it's going to make it harder to feed us all at 10 billion. So for me, it seems like I think the concern that people have when people start talking about lowering the population is, oh, you want to get rid of all the poor brown people. And I'm saying,
Okay.
no, I
Yeah.
want to help future generations of poor people of all colors, by the way, so that everyone can have something,
Okay.
have a decent life. We can't live like we are and have 10 billion people on the planet. Somebody's going to suffer. It's probably not going to be middle-class Americans first, but eventually we will. And there'll be more wars over land. There'll be more refugees and people, you know, we already have immigration fights everywhere in the Western world.
Right.
So for me, a smaller population helps everything. And eventually, you know, our population hopefully will go down to a number that is not 8 billion or 10 billion. It will hopefully at some point go down to a population that's closer to 2 billion, frankly. And with automation, AI, you got me started, Allison. So just let me, one more thing before, you know, everyone talks about not having enough jobs, not having enough
Mhm.
people to do jobs, but with automation and AI, with a population of 10 billion, there's going to be a lot of people out of jobs. Let's face it, jobs are going to be ending. And the one concern that also people bring up about why we should continue to have babies is that so we can take care of old people. This seems to me to be a Ponzi scheme. You can't just
I
keep
was just
having
gonna say the
babies.
pyramid model. Yeah, it's like you need the next generation to take care of the older generation, and you hear that argument all the time.
Because the older generation right now is baby boomers. I'm part of that generation. There's so many of them. If we have fewer kids, we're not gonna be able to take care of them. And I have to say, yes, that's a challenge, which by the way, Japan has been dealing with for several decades, and Japan has not fallen apart. The countries who are falling apart are the countries that have a huge younger population because they're not able to give jobs to those and education and opportunity to those people in so many countries, especially in Africa, for example, where a lot of the population is going to grow. So I advocate for, by the way, choosing that people choose to have I don't want to force anybody to have smaller families, by the way. I want to be sure. I want to just encourage that we see the benefits of having small families. There
Yeah.
are benefits to parents to having fewer kids. And we don't talk about it in our culture because pronatalism has basically gotten every species to continue to live for decades and decades. But unfortunately now we've pronatalized so well that we've grown too big, and we need to change our idea of what a happy, healthy family looks like.
Was it
Okay,
a
I'm now off my soapbox.
personal sacrifice for you? I mean, was it like, did you plan to be child-free regardless of this issue or being so passionate about this issue?
I grew up in the 70s, so I grew up on those commercials of starving kids in India and Africa and everywhere. And I remember telling my friend Susie Hollander, I'm not going to have any kids because there's too many people in the world, because starvation was a big deal then.
Yeah.
Our parents told us to clean our plate because there were starving kids in China. So I said that, and when I was, I think 9, 10, 11, something like that, my mother said, oh, Alexandra, you'll change your mind when you're 29, when the
Yeah.
biological clock kicks in. And it never did, because my feelings about the environment and my just were so strong. Now, I did look into adoption. I did look into, because I thought I was afraid of what I might be missing if I didn't have a kid. And so I looked into adoption, and my husband said, are, are you looking into adoption because you want to either save a child, you're afraid of what you're missing, or you're afraid like when your dad and like what I'm doing now, helping my mom, that you're not going to have anybody take care of you when you're older. And I kind of
Right.
went, I think yes. And he said, those are not good reasons to have a child. And so we decided not to. He had a vasectomy, and yeah, we decided not to. And we're very happy in our life. And yes, I'm missing things for sure, but I'm gaining other things, so it's like I admire parents so much. I admire you. I know you're a parent, for
Yeah.
having it juggling work and parenting. It's such an important job. But yeah, my path was different.
Okay. So let's talk about the documentary that's coming out on Hulu. It's coming out on Hulu August 28th. It's called After Baywatch: Moment in the Sun. Is this
Mhm.
a docu-series or a documentary movie?
It is a documentary in 4 parts, so it is a series on Hulu. And I have not seen it. And it was started filming in 2019, before the pandemic, and I was interviewed then. So I look 5 years younger. And also, Baywatch went on for 12 years, 12 seasons or something. So there's a lot of people in it. The director, Matthew Felker, interviewed most of the actors who were
Wow.
regulars. And so there's a lot there. I don't know. I have no idea what he has with me in it at all, frankly. I did an interview. He has footage of me in the ocean swimming, but otherwise, maybe he got other footage out there of me. I have no idea how he's going to frame
You
me.
guys, like, is there a premiere where you're going to be able to see the finished product at all before it airs?
I would hope so, but I don't know. Now, like with online stuff, I saw the promo when it came out, the same time everybody else saw the promo, the trailer. So yeah,
Okay.
we haven't, but I like Matthew, and so I trust that he's going to tell the truth and be kind and thoughtful, but probably tell the truth. I'm such a Pollyanna. I have nothing negative to say really about Baywatch. I think my biggest beefs were the fact that we were all so white, and
Right.
and the producers they really tried. They're good, really good people in my estimation, but it was the 90s, and they were white men, and it wasn't really something that they were aware of. They had a lot of very positive storylines to help the world, but stuff like race wasn't really on their radar. So
I'm just picking up this little guy for the last few questions because
yeah.
he's crying and
Oh,
I'd rather him not
hello.
cry. This is Dash.
Hi, Dash. How are you? You are adorable. Oh my
Oh God,
gosh.
he's glutton for attention right now. So Nicole Eggert is one of the producers on the documentary.
Yes, she is. She approached a lot of us actors because we knew her, and frankly, I don't know if I would have agreed to an interview unless I'd had somebody like her saying, "Yeah, this guy is cool, and we're not going to do a hatchet job on you, Alexandra." Because as an actor on a show like Baywatch, you get a lot of sort of "where are they now" articles, and
Right.
they just don't. They all make it sound like our lives are terrible and we've all failed because we're no longer on the number one show, some number one show, And when really, in reality, the actors are, I mean, they're thriving. They're
Yeah.
they're thriving after this show. They have beautiful lives, families, passions, great work. So I felt good after Nicole asked me to be in it to say yes.
My biggest gripe with the whole celebrity culture is that it's that people don't give respect to how much somebody accomplished in their life and in their career, that if you're not the flavor of the moment, you are branded as where are they now? Oh my God, they're not at that zenith that they were at that time. And it's like, what about looking at somebody's life and career as a whole, and and the fact that they were a part of this incredible phenomenon, and that they did have this incredible moment in time that people are going to enjoy for generations to come. I mean, I don't really get that disposable attitude. And I've always respected the cast of Baywatch, that so many, I don't think it's a coincidence that so many of you guys care about the planet, care about the ocean, care about health and wellness. I mean, I watch on social media and I see where everybody's at. And so many of you are into healthy living, giving back, caring about nature. And I just think I think you guys are just a beautiful group of people. I
Thank
mean, for
you. You know,
sure.
Baywatch wasn't, it was looked down on by Americans when it was on in the 90s. And we were a syndicated show, which meant it didn't have the cachet of being a network show. So I
Yeah.
think coming from being all sort of an underdog, even though we had this around the world, if you traveled outside of the United States, people were just unabashedly excited to meet you. In the United States, they would come up to me and they go, "Hey, are you on that show? I don't watch it, but are you on that show?" My husband would be so pissed off. He'd be standing there going, "Really? You don't watch it? Well, a billion people a week watch it." And like, "Oh, really? How did you know she was on it if you didn't watch it?" You know, that kind of thing. But they
Yeah.
always felt like they had to, or they had to distance themselves, or they would say, "Hi,
Yeah.
you're on Baywatch." And they would laugh. It was like a way of diminishing the fact that they were excited that they were meeting somebody that they was
Yeah.
saying. So I think we all had to sort of learn to live with that. And so we didn't lose perspective on, we weren't always high in the air. Yes, we were in the #1 show, but we weren't necessarily treated like we were gods and goddesses. So I think
Yeah.
that just, all recognize that the world is important and there was a lot we could do in it. It wasn't just there to serve us.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you just a few questions that I ask everybody.
Okie dokie.
If you were given the gift of time travel and you could go back in time and either change or bear witness to any famous historical event, where would you want to go and what would you attempt to change or just bear witness to in real time?
Wow. Okay. So I think, I mean, I probably would have been involved with the civil rights movement in the 60s. And I asked my mom, like, how could she have not been involved with that, when it was going on? And she kind of said to me, "Oh, even though she was an activist, she didn't get involved with the street marches and things. And she was aware, but I don't think she had. Her husband was a banker and a really conservative. So I think I would have wanted to be part of that and meet Martin Luther King. Yeah, I've met Nelson Mandela because of my work registering voters. That was
Oh,
amazing. But Martin Luther King, I would have loved to have met him.
oh, awesome.
So not
And
too far back. I was alive during that time, actually. So it would have just been that I would have been 18 instead of 6.
okay. And what do you think you've mastered in this life and what remains a work in progress for you?
I am very disciplined, and I started being disciplined early because I saw myself, and this is not to put myself down, but that I was not great at anything, but I was kind of good at a lot of things. So I recognized that the only way to get ahead was to just be more disciplined, just show up, be more disciplined than the other person, which isn't that hard to do in the world and in Hollywood too. So I worked really hard on the acting craft and to get better as an actor. And I'm proud of that because I couldn't slide by on talent. And I'd like to be more flexible because being disciplined can be good, but also there's times when it's good to be flexible and to just go, okay, I don't have to do that. I don't have to work out today. I don't have to, be perfect. Actually, I'm not trying to be perfect anymore. That's one thing that I recognized I wasn't going to achieve. And also it's kind of dumb. Like, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, my most important ethic I get from Ingrid Newkirk, who founded PETA, which is be kind, be kind, be kind. And it's different from being nice, which is what I was when I was a teenager and in my 20s. Because
Yeah.
nice is to make everybody think you're like doing for everyone else. Be kind
Yeah.
is action. It's just standing as yourself and being a kind, thoughtful person. Being nice is kind of makes me think I'm pleasing people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always say that being nice is putting on a face, putting on a mask. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And do you pray? And if so, who or what do you pray to?
You know what? I don't pray, but when I do, well, I shouldn't say I never pray. I am not a religious person, even though I grew up in the church, but I am not even that spiritual a person. I believe in just being kind, which can have a sort of spirituality. The time I felt closest to God kind of was when I went to Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina and volunteered to help at the animal shelters. And all I did was clean out cat litter boxes. For some reason, I just that simple act of just cleaning cat litter boxes for cats was like the closest to God I've ever been. And that's probably just because in a lot of religions, service is really important, and it was just pure service. But when an ambulance goes by or a fire truck, I always say, may the person involved be fine. I sort of say something to myself. And my husband and I have a gratitude practice at night before we turn off the lights. We ask each other what we're grateful for. So
Oh,
we,
love that.
yeah.
And what do you think you came into this life as Alexandra Paul to learn? And what do you think you came here to teach people?
Well, my name Alexandra means helper of mankind. So I think that I have wanted to help people and animals from since I was very, very young. And so that's what I would like to do. And right now my focus is a lot on population because I'm so worried about it, and also animal rights because it breaks my heart how animals are treated around the world by humans. And so those are the things that my focus is on right now.
Okay. And my last question for you is there a funny, quirky, silly Baywatch set secret that from those days that you can reveal that people would be surprised about?
Oh, okay. Well, they did paint on abs. In case you're wondering, there was shading done to make
Okay.
abs
Boring.
look more pronounced, although they really, most of the guys didn't need it, but they often would do that. And I would get a little shading right here for cleavage, even though, so shading was important.
So they contoured some boobs and some abs.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. We still had to work out and eat well, so.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I want to thank you so much for a great interview. This was great.
Thank you, Allison.
You can listen to this entire episode and other interviews of mine by going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and downloading and subscribing to the Allison Interviews podcast.